Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Chai Tea Tai Chi web show. I'm Dane Dormio, and I am here with my good buddy Andrew Brown, and we're both excited to be joined today by a Taoist priestess in training and shamanic alchemist, Katherine Bird. Katherine is actually reading about your background. I kind of think of like the MacGyver of of energy work. Like, um, but it all does have to do with energy, and qigong is a big part of what you do. So that's why I thought you'd have some great messages for our audience. But I'd like to start with your origin story. How did you how did your character come into being?
My origin story really is that I was just a super sensitive kind of weirdo person, a kid, and as I think a lot of people are. But when I was 15, I went through some intense stuff, and I was medicated, and I was put on medications because I had anxiety and depression and social anxiety disorder, and I had all of these diagnoses, and they started medicating me, and more medications and didn't really get better. And then I came to a point in my 20s, and I just got this really strong message that I needed to go off of these medicines, and I needed to figure out who I was. I needed to quit everything I'd ever done before. And when I did that, I just went through a super intense awakening experience of just hours in, not being able to leave the house, and just channeling and visions and super intense energy moving through me, and kriyas and spontaneous things going on. And I was really messed up. It messed me up bad. And I became almost non-functional for a while, and couldn't leave the house hardly, super sensitive, really overwhelmed, didn't know what was happening, couldn't explain it, had never seen anything like what was happening to me. I was like, I don't know, maybe National Geographic somewhere. I was like trying to pull in what this might be. And there wasn't an explanation. So I started looking for one, and I ended up being dropped into, as it happens, right? I ended up being dropped into a teacher's sphere, and started training with a woman in Los Angeles pretty intensively in energy practices, and a mix of qigong, tai chi, and sacred dance movement meditation practices that she had brought from the Middle East, and from her sacred dance practice. And so she was weaving these together and creating and these very, very profound energy work, meditation practices, and internal alchemy practices. And so that's really where it started, like the origin, because that's what that was my lifeline. It was the thing that saved me. It was the thing that I started to understand what was happening, and I started to understand the energy, and I started to be able to control what was happening, instead of being at the kind of whim and mercy of the energetics that I was feeling.
Wow.
I can definitely relate to being the weird kid, and I know there are a lot of people out there who can also relate to that, and I can also relate to undergoing a massive spiritual opening in my young adult life, in my early 20s. Mine was actually largely brought on by qigong and internal martial arts. That was a major catalyst for me. But it sounds like, hearing you describe your experience, actually, I'm thinking of the work of Stan Grof in transpersonal psychology, and specifically the spiritual emergency network. Are you familiar with Stan Grof's concept?
A little
of the
bit, yeah.
spiritual emergency? It's essentially that. It's when a person, for whatever reason, has a major spiritual opening. They become extremely sensitive and aware in ways they weren't before, and it causes a breakdown, or it doesn't fit in with their lives, and it's a struggle and it's a challenge, and nobody around them can relate to what they're going through. And it's it looked at in one way it's a massive growth experience, but looked at in lots of ways it could just be a total disaster and could result in hospitalization and psychiatric disorder classification and that sort of thing. So I love the fact that
well, that's okay. He'll come back. He'll come back. So, what you were saying about having all those drugs that you had to be on, that's got to be an experience. So every single time you took a new drug, how'd you feel? Like, did it change your mood, change your personality? Like, what did it do?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I feel like a lot of times the drugs actually were causing me to have depression and anxiety and all this weird stuff. And then I would have the symptoms, and then they'd be like, oh, well, it's because you need to like take more, or you need to take something else, or, you need to add something on. And I'll tell you, it was one of the most challenging things I think anybody can go through is actually getting off of psychotropic medications. And I know that I've had clients who've gone through that and even helped my mom go through that process. And it can be one of the most difficult things that you do, because it's such a hard detox, and people don't talk about that. People don't talk about the symptoms that people have, and it's not just the detox. It's like the emotional repression that has occurred from the time that you start taking those things all the way through. Like, it's almost like you have to go through everything that you are trying to avoid all at once. And so then you're like processing years of anger and fear and grief and all this pain that you didn't want to deal with before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a very close friend of mine. He's going through the detox right now, getting off those mood changing drugs. And he's said, like, man, I have suicidal thoughts almost every day.
Yeah.
I just have to keep telling myself I don't want to kill myself. I don't want to die. And just keep like the affirmations, talking to his friends, keep his mood up. Because yeah, you're right. It's like you said, all the emotion that had been repressed hits you all at once. And
Yeah.
It's overwhelming, like you were saying. So
and on the flip side, though, there was joy and bliss and like orgasmic potential of life was like exponentially expanded. So you go from living in sort of a very narrow range of focus to something really quite large, which is challenging. And we can see within that the structures of what has been created in our society is all about design toward us staying in a very narrow experience of what our capability is energetically, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Everything is about keeping us in a very narrow range.
Yeah, well, I can agree to that 100%. So would you say that when you're taking these drugs, when you're pharmacologically, I guess, controlled, would you say like all of your sensations, your emotions, your daily, like just the ups and downs of the day is kind of just compressed, and you just you're even instead of this? Normally, like your sine waves. That's normally how you're supposed to live your life, is like always coming up and down, but you're just kind of flat.
Yeah, you're a little bit more flat, a little more gray.
Wow.
But what I found for me was because of that, I was like, well, what I want to stimulate myself. So I would engage in more risky behaviors, and I would, be out doing things and, trying to get the high of life, trying to feel a little bit more, right? So it's a really fascinating thing that we're going through. And you know, and then people want to be on a spiritual path and they want to be more conscious, and it's a great challenge to be more conscious and to be, you know, subjugated.
So did you go skydiving to try to feel what it's like to be alive?
I did not go skydiving. I'd say I probably engaged in more risky behaviors than that.
Okay. All right, well, welcome back, Dane. Sorry, you had some issues, but
I ducked out for a second, but I back now. It sounds like you guys were talking.
I'm not hearing you.
Oh, is something wrong with my sound?
I can hear.
Oh, I'm hearing you, but I'm not hearing him.
Oh no.
This is strange.
I can hear you.
Okay, let me try something really quick. This is bizarre. A bizarre computer day.
That's okay. It happens.
Do you hear me now, Andrew?
Technical difficulties. Oh well.
I guess not, huh?
Nope.
You don't hear him.
Nope.
That's okay. We'll see how this works.
Oh, he's like.
I'll
really
translate
far.
between you guys.
Try this.
It sounded like I missed some really interesting stuff that you guys were discussing, but I wanted to ask in particular, and you might have already addressed this a little bit, because you mentioned being the weird kid growing up and being energetically sensitive, which is something I hear a lot of people identify and describe themselves that way these days, energetically sensitive. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because one thing I was curious about is specifically, is qigong a good practice for people who identify that way, for people who consider themselves to be energetically sensitive? Is it a good thing for them to do, or is it like maybe too much and you know, for someone like that?
I think it's really important to understand that it is very, very helpful for people who are energetically sensitive. I train healers and shamans and channels and psychics and so on. So, you know, the people that I work with are very sensitive. And what I see more than anything is there's this sort of amorphous sensitivity where it's, you know, everything is sort of open and there's a lot of stuff coming in, but there's not a lot of filters. There's not a lot of grounding. So a lot of connection to the lower energy centers, to the lower dantian. There's not a lot of held reserve energy in the lower centers, or connection to the lower centers. Actually, a lot of people are really cut off from the lower centers. And so one of the things that happens sometimes is people start getting involved in what would be called energy practices. They go on YouTube and they're like, how do I become more psychic? And they're already super sensitive, but for some reason they're decided that what they should do is become more psychic. And then they start doing all these meditations and waking up the third eye and destabilizing themselves. And what they really need is some basic good qigong that's going to help them to clear out the things that they've been holding on to from other people and, you know, from their past and their own, you know, kind of bullshit and stories that are hanging out in the energy body, and then to be really grounded, to find out what it feels to be sourced and grounded. Because I think a lot of times people who are very sensitive, you know, empaths and energetically sensitive people, they're so busy tracking other people's energy and tracking the world around them and kind of focusing outward, that there needs to be a lot of training on being able to come home, re-inhabit the body, and understand how to truly ground and source from the earth. And, you know, that's what energetically sensitive people need. They sometimes think they need to be more psychic for some reason. I'm not sure what that's all about.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be able to practice the occult, but, you know, sometimes double-edged sword.
So it's it sounds like you're saying if for people who feel like they are energetically sensitive and the kind of things that they might experience are being drained by being around other people or going about their life, or they may feel very strongly affected by things that other people seem to shrug off. And what you're saying is that yes, absolutely, qigong and tai chi and working with your own energy is exactly what you need to be able to do in order to center and self-source and ground and something that you didn't mention explicitly, but I think it's in there also, is to protect or conserve or develop energetic boundaries, so that you are not just unconsciously automatically affected so much, but that you are in more of a position of intentionality about where you're taking your energy from and where you're directing it to. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of times we're, what I've discovered in working with people and working with empaths and people who are, naturally drawn into healing work, is that a lot of times, as children, we're in a situation in our home where we're witnessing our parents in struggle. We're aware and conscious of other people having, problems. And so, but as that child, we're trying to be safe. We're trying to save ourselves. We're trying to be okay in the world, and we're trying to help. And so we really set up these very dysfunctional energetic processing systems. And we start pulling energy in and trying to transmute it through our bodies. We start using different energy centers, some more than others, to try to transmute. And it is cumulative over time that we start to collect too much of other people's things. It becomes our go-to processing system. So then we start doing therapy or healing work or something, and we're effective because we can come into a room and draw and drain, discordant energies from someone, but we're not aware of what's going on, and we're actually kind of holding on to those energies, and over time will affect our health and well-being, where we feel drained, we feel overwhelmed, we have random illnesses and pain in our body. And the thing about qigong is it's not about how can I put up some sort of shield and be like, there's a lot of this bullshit out there where it's like, let me shield and keep all you people away, you toxic, horrible people from my life. It's about how can I build my internal system at a strong, radiant place, so that I'm so radiant within myself, and I'm understanding the energetic anatomy that I'm working with, and I'm understanding other people's energetic anatomy that they're working with, and I don't need to even really think about that part, right? I don't need to think about, oh my gosh, I've got to put up a shield and protect myself from other people's stuff, because we become this essence of radiance within us through this process of doing qigong and doing tai chi. It's the natural progression of what happens when you do these practices.
Definitely.
Right.
Could I ask real quick? I just wanted to see, could you give us like a breathing exercise that you teach a lot of your clients or a lot of your students? Something very simple.
Something that's very simple. So yeah. I think one that's really important and vital is to be kind of some strong breathing. So inhaling in and bringing the breath in and holding in the breath, holding it in the chest, holding and letting the body kind of relax around the breath, and then dropping that down into the belly, like you've got a fat pregnant belly, and then blowing it out the mouth really strong. And again, inhale in. Hold into the chest, relax the bones around the lungs, and swallow that down into the pregnant belly. and then exhale out through the mouth really strong.
All right. All right.
And so, you know, in this, we get to start to find different places inside the body where we're holding the stagnation, and we're holding the tension within us, and then, you know, getting rid of it. A lot of what people need is to clean themselves up, clean themselves out, because they're sensitive and they're taking on other people's things. And we're often so like muddy and, you know, muddified with you know, everything that we're taking from other people, or we're not expressing through ourselves. We're not actually being honest. We're not telling the truth. We're not having boundaries. We're not, you know, telling people what we really think or feel. We're not crying. We're not laughing. We're not yelling. We're not expressing in any kind of way. And so we're just more and more repressed inside of our bodies. And that's why it's not enough to meditate. People think, oh, I'll be spiritual and I'll meditate. And it's like, no, you actually have to move the body, the physical body. That's what we're here in a body. Like, it's like, why would we be given this thing? Why? What would be the purpose in the divine plan for us to make a decision to incorporate? Unless we were going to actually use it to develop ourselves, to evolve, to become more spiritual. It has to be a part of the puzzle piece, because just like if you look at, you know, permaculture, it's right where your problem is your solution. It's like, well, the problem here is my solution. I need to actually work through it in that way.
Good.
Yeah,
we're all evolving in parallel.
I love that you bring up the importance of movement to spiritual evolution or spiritual development on an individual level. And I'm reminded of there's a parallel with biology, which is that the whole point of having a brain and a nervous system itself is to coordinate movement, and that's what differentiates the animal kingdom from the plant kingdom, essentially. And there's an example of a certain type of animal that is able to move around in the larval phase. It's a sea creature. It moves around in the larval phase, and it has a tiny collection of neurons, a tiny brain, and then it gets to where it attaches to something and it lives the rest of its life without moving, and it digests its own brain because it no longer has a need to move.
Is that what's happening to us as a society?
Well, yeah, you could maybe look at it as a warning that use it or lose it, in the sense that, you know, our brain is there for the purpose of moving the body. If you don't move the body, not only does the body deteriorate, but the brain also deteriorates. And the idea that meditation as just sitting, what most people think of as just sitting meditation, where you're not moving, and you're doing all this internal work, and it's important to recognize. That's why I'm glad you brought it up, that is a component of a complete integral spiritual practice. It's not the whole thing. It's not the only thing. And the needs of the body, and specifically the movement of the body, cannot be neglected. It's also just as integral, a piece of that puzzle of the overall development and evolution of ourselves as individuals.
Yep, absolutely. I just am picturing all of these, you know, the people, and they're like, you know, their chairs, that they're like lazy boy chairs, and they're like, they're just gonna put wheels on them and, you know, take us around. And yeah, well, I think it's important for us to, you know, as spiritual leaders and practitioners and so on, to be reminding people of this, because I can't tell you how many people I work with who, you know, when you go into, you lead them into something, right? You lead them into themselves to discover more about themselves, right? As a healer or spiritual practitioner. And rarely are people like, I need to work more, or I need to like, whatever. What their essence says is, I need to move my body more. I need to get in nature more. Like, they're rarely coming up with, from the core essence of their being, when you really dive in there, the things that they think they need to do. It's almost always, oh, I need to move my body. I need to eat better. I need to drink more water, and I need to be in nature. And that's it.
Yeah.
So one connection I'm curious about is the link between solo energetic cultivation practice and fulfilling your life purpose. Solo energetic cultivation practice in its many forms, which is qigong and all kinds of things like that, the range of modalities there are. But what does that have to do with fulfilling your life purpose, and which kind of relates, it kind of goes in the opposite direction of, people, there's a false dichotomy between kind of peace and tranquility and just being in the moment with planning and setting and achieving goals and achievement and accomplishment. So what's the connection here?
Well, I was on a call yesterday with a client of mine who is working on a book. And, we were going over, this process, these ends, very intense process to be working on a book. And I'm in an editing process on a book right now. And I'll tell you that in the midst of writing and receiving and doing, like a very doing thing, which is writing, that the best way, if I'm stuck, if I'm not sure what to do next, if I'm working on a program and I don't know where to go next with it or whatever it is, if I go and just start to do practice, usually within 5 minutes, I'm like, okay. Because I don't know, what is it? Einstein said something about, I can think of 99 things, but the minute I stop, that's where I get the answer, paraphrase. Yeah. But it's that connection to the breath and the body, and relinquishing the control of the mind, which thinks it knows what to do. It thinks it knows the right thing. It thinks it knows what you want. It's when we tap into our body, our breath, into movement, into sound, into allowing ourselves to be really, really present with that part of ourselves, that we skip the mind part, the brain part that's whirling and trying to make things happen in a very specific way. And we start to then tune into that higher mind, and the higher part of us that's more connected to the heart and more connected to more the truth of our soul of this is actually what I came here to do. Like, my brain thinks that I came here to make money and like fulfill some sort of desire of my father, and create something that, somebody else is going to appreciate or be proud of in some kind of way. Like,
eat, sleep, mate, survive.
That's what we think. That's what the brain is going to get us to do. So we have to step out of that enough during the day. And I'm a big proponent of, like, you don't have to do some giant crazy practice that, because a lot of people don't. They just don't. They don't think that they have time for it. They don't want to. They're not going to do it. So it's like, what can you take in the realm of qigong, tai chi, movement, breath, and sound, moving, being focused, being intention, being aware, bring it into your life, do it at points enough so that you can start to break the patterns that keep you going down a road that you might not be happy with at the end. So that you're actually becoming inspired on a regular basis. You're becoming inspired during the day to like go, actually, I'm going to write that article I want to write. Like I'm going to do this extremely risky thing of, quitting this job I hate so that I have time to do the things I love and have an impact on the planet.
If to maybe put it very short in a very concise way.
I'm verbose.
Mastery of your own mind-body energy system is the essential requirement for fulfilling your purpose and your potential.
Yeah.
You really can't go wrong with mastering your own mind-body energy system. I mean, what could be bad? And I kind of have this problem sort of with qigong, which is I've wondered, like, does this happen to other people, or is this just me, that when I practice qigong, I tend to I'll start. There might be some initial resistance at first, but I get into it. I start moving and standing and breathing and focusing, and then I start getting all these amazing insights and breakthroughs and ideas, and I got to stop to write them down. I've started keeping like a blank pad nearby so that whenever I'm doing my qigong practice for the insights I get, and I realize, wait, that's not a problem. That's a good thing. So I wonder, like, does anybody else have that experience where you start getting so many good ideas when you practice, you actually have to interrupt your practice to write them down and capture them, and sometimes I'll stop practicing altogether and just sit down and start writing and write out a whole article, and like, wait, that's not a bad thing at all.
Right. I mean, isn't it funny that your first flavor of that is like, how can I judge myself for having this experience that I'm having? Right? Like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm qigonging wrong. But I think that's the thing. He's like, well, I'm in the book. What do I do when I get stuck? Right? What do I do when I get stuck? Like, well, move your body, do some breath work, just take yourself out of that and put yourself over here and see what happens. You're probably going to have a different experience pretty quickly.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that the practice doesn't have to be a really big thing, which I think is important, because there's a range of benefits, and it's not about if you're doing it perfectly or you're getting the most. It's about are you getting benefit from what you're doing. And my Sifu said something like, if you do 5 minutes worth of qigong, you'll get 5 minutes worth of benefit. If you do 10 minutes worth, you'll get 10 minutes worth of benefit. It's up to you. And a teacher in a book that I read described the ongoing practice as, when you get to advanced stages of internal work, when you're pursuing a particular path of study and development, you'll be spending an hour and a half daily in your practice, and people say, oh wow, that seems like so long, that's so much time. And he says, but when you're practicing, it doesn't seem like a long time. You're in a kind of a timeless state, and it's completely absorbing, and it doesn't seem like a long time. So there are benefits that can be accessed through really dedicated, intense practice like that. So I think it's important to understand that there are benefits to that, but you don't have to do that to get the benefits.
I think it's important Yeah, I just think
5
it's
minutes
important.
is so good for you.
Yeah, I think it's just important to voice because, and the same thing happens with yoga or whatever, because studios do an hour and a half or an hour or whatever. And, you have to make it because you pay the money and the whole thing. It's like a lot of people that I've worked with end up with this weird sort of belief that they don't realize is a belief, that if I don't have time to do an hour, if I don't have time to do an hour and a half, I don't have time to do anything. So I'm just not going to do anything. And so then they stop themselves from actually going, you know what, I've got 15 minutes. Okay, let's do 15 minutes. Or, hey, honey, like, can you watch the kids for 20 minutes? I'm going to go upstairs and do a little bit of a practice. Because they're like, oh, well, I don't have time, because that's one of the things that people always say about things like qigong is like, well, I don't have time for it. And the thing is, you will end up in that very present space where an hour and a half doesn't seem like a big deal. But to get people started, sometimes you need to just, like, okay, a little bit. And over time you build your own resiliency and ability to handle being present for that period of time.
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of my students, I tell them, just do the John Zhuang. Just do 3 minutes every day. In 10 years, you're going to be really strong. You'll be really good at it. Just do it every day for 3 minutes. That's it. It's not a big deal. 3 minutes, anyone can find 3 minutes. You're watching commercials on TV. Might as well just stand.
Yeah. Right, and it's a shift, right? It's a mind shift.
What's the key principle that you teach and recommend for anchoring in a daily practice? Because that's really like the real treasure is when you have your own personal daily practice. And of course, it anchors in over time. It anchors in and builds incrementally. But what's the one key thing for anyone to anchor in their own personal daily energetic practice?
Stop looking at your phone.
Why?
But I mean, like, first thing in the morning, stop checking your email. Like, don't do that to yourself, right? Because that's the thing that distracts people out of actually going to their practice almost a lot of times. And so it's like starting to build in those little habits where, for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to make the lemon water and pine pollen bitter tea thing, right? And so it's like there's ritual involved. I'm going to light the incense, and there's these little steps. And the more you can build in these little steps, you're like, oh, okay, so then that's the next thing I do. And then you kind of like have this little system. And the more that you build your little system in, and you have a space where there's a thing that happens there, this is the place that I practice, this is where I do this thing that I do, then your mind starts making associations. It starts making these connections. It starts making, these correspondences. Oh, okay, I have this altar space, and it has candles, and it has incense, and it has these things that I find are beautiful, and that inspires me. And I have the meditation cushion, and so that's reminding me. And I have, this, humans are very, very affected by ritual. Once we start to ritualize something, I mean, come on, people will do the same thing every single day if they start to make it into some sort of ritual for themselves and start to recognize that there's other things in your lives, the way you brush your teeth and the way you take a shower and all these things that are a ritual. And it's like, okay, what's the easiest way for you to start building this into your ritual? And it doesn't have to look the same every day. You might not want to do whatever big practice with a bunch of movement and stuff today. You might want to sit, and you might not want to sit today. You might want to do squats, and you might want to do push-ups, and you might want to jump around and listen to a certain different kind of music, and that's okay too. It's like ritualize it and find a way to be, for it to engage you, for it to excite you.
Yeah, there's so much great stuff in what you just said. That's all really perfect. To concisify it, I'd say you mentioned the principle of ritualizing, make it into a personal ritual, which whether you like the word habit or routine or ritual. I like the word ritual because it has a feeling of a sense of maybe reverence about it, or sacredness, but make it into a ritual, something that happens every day, and it doesn't have to be intense, and it doesn't have to be robotic and repetitive, but especially anchoring in a mind, body, or energetic practice in with your morning rituals, which we all have. And if your morning ritual is wake up and immediately look at your phone and email, basically is what you're saying, right? Like do something mindful instead, as your very first conscious act of the day, and also take advantage of the principle of dedicated space. Have a space where this happens, and build up all the positive associations with it, so that when it's time to get up, you feel like getting up. And when it's time to have your tea, you feel like having tea. And when it's time to do your journaling, you feel like you're doing your journaling, or to meditate, or for qigong. When it's time for this, that's what your body is conditioned and associated to. So that's what you feel like doing.
Yeah.
And it becomes as automatic as brushing your teeth, or any of the other things that we do repetitively without it seeming like a drag or taking it for granted. Or if somebody forced you to skip doing it, you would protest. So I know that you do various types of teaching in terms of courses and workshops and coaching, but I know that you are in the midst of a launch right now of a program called 5 Elements for Empaths, and so I wanted to hear a little bit about what specifically that is. 5 Elements presumably comes from TCM, traditional Chinese medicine theory, and so I'm curious about how you, what that's about and how it integrates the TCM principles.
Yeah. So, when I started studying more medical qigong and Chinese medicine, one of the things that I really was fascinated by and interested in was the concepts and the awareness of how the organ systems, the elements, the meridians, like everything has these corresponding, everything is corresponding, and that these elements and organ systems, they correspond to the emotions and to the what your emotions are, and that there is our original true nature, which is this very spiritualized essence of trust and truth and honor and integrity and wisdom and all of the things that we strive for, all of these virtues. And then we have an acquired essence of fear and mistrust and anger and grief and all of these things that have been put upon us through our experiences in this life. And how that through qigong, through focused intent and awareness and consciousness around moving the energy through our bodies, we could start to open up some of these repressed and old emotions and start to move those out, and then focus on these higher spiritualized essence, these virtues, and be with those more and cultivate those more. So that, because I'm studying to be a Taoist priest, and when I started doing the medical qigong training, one of the reasons the main reason that my intention towards all of that study was really, how do I be a better human being? How do, you know, there's all this stuff where like, oh, I want to be this powerful thing or be able to do this with energy or see whatever. But it's like, well, how do I be a better human? How do I be a better person? How do I be more kind and patient and, you know, present with people in a positive way? How do I be a beneficial presence to humanity? And so I was really inspired by that. And then I was really inspired by how pissed off that I am over the training and the talk and the bullshit that's out there around empaths and the need to protect and shield and blame, so much blame and victim stuff, and so much like everybody's toxic and I'm just the victim of everybody's experience over here. And I wanted to bring those things together because what I see is that the repressed emotions, the stuck energy, the stuff that's not moving is triggered by its coming into awareness of another human being's negative emotions, right? So someone is angry and they're putting out this energy and it's strong because it's pushed by their emotions, and it's these thought forms that are moving out into the world. And I really love the Taoist awareness of the forms, the energetic, you know, entities that are created by our own thoughts and feelings, and how that these thought forms going out there into the world are basically then finding the like energies inside of us, and they're causing those like energies to vibrate. And that's what we're responding to. And that's what we're being triggered about. And we're like, oh, well, you're such an asshole because you're triggering my fear and my anger and my shame. So I need to protect myself from you, or I need to get away from you, or you need to go away. You need to do something different, instead of, oh, you're just here showing me myself so that I can look deeper and I can work on myself. And that's what I want to give people access to is, oh, I'm not like, yes, I'm sensitive. I'm feeling things, but the more I work on myself, the less it's going to bother me, right? That I can come in contact with other people and I can know, wow, that person's really angry. That person's grieving. That person is in a lot of pain. And I can take it in, I can use it for information, I can use it for healing, I can use it so that I can get out of their way, I can use it so that I can, you know, make a different decision, I can have a boundary, I can state my needs, but it goes through, it goes past, it doesn't need to stick inside of me and vibrate with my own repressed energy to try to give me an awareness about myself that I'm not willing to look at. And I'm so excited about it because it's not all about the story. It's not all about, well, this thing happened to me and this is the thing. It's like, no, let's make some sound and let's move the body and let's do some breath and let's do some specific motions and let's focus on releasing and focus on drawing in what we really want to connect to, and shift and change our own frequency, shift and change our own resonance, so that our gifts of being an empath, our gifts of being sensitive, our gifts of being aware of what's going on with other people can be used as gifts that, okay, now I can step up, I can be a healer, I can be a therapist, I can take care of my kids in a new way, I can engage with my partner and not get taken out and, you know, want to leave the relationship whenever it gets, you know, tough. Because I think that the sensitive people and the people that are out there getting really overwhelmed by the world are really here to do big things. And I'm kind of sick of there being this story that I'm just too sensitive because I've had that story. I'm just too sensitive and I can't take the world, and I just can't do this thing, and I can't do this work, and I have this calling, but I just can't, and it's too much. And so So that's why I created this course, because I was super excited about all of those things. As you can tell, I'm just like super excited about it.
Yeah. So this is using sort of teaching how to work with your own internal energy in a masterful way, for people who maybe suffer from being too sensitive. But what I'm curious about is, some people may have that issue and realize that they have that issue. Some people may have that issue and not realize that's what the issue is. So what would it be like if you're somebody who's like, hey, maybe you have these problems, these symptoms, these manifestations in your life. Have you ever thought it might be because you actually have a high level of sensitivity? And they go, oh wow, I hadn't thought of that. What would be some signs for that kind of person?
A lot of times it's just being exhausted and overwhelmed by being around other people, feeling kind of the weight of the world. An empath is someone who, like, everyone can practice empathy unless you have a pretty severe personality disorder, but which is like putting yourself in someone else's shoes. But empaths are able to go, oh, I can feel that. And sometimes it's feeling physical sensations. Sometimes it's feeling nauseous. You get around a certain person and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel kind of sick to my stomach, or I feel like I want to throw up around this person. Or, it can come through in different ways where you start to have physical reactions. A lot of times they're physical to people or situations. Sometimes it's like watching the news or something's going on in the world and you're like, oh, I'm being taken out by this. Like, I can't even deal with what's going on right now in our society. Being really tired at the end of the day when you're leaving from work and you realize you don't realize that you're caretaking everybody, right? You're energetically caretaking other people. You're emotionally caretaking other people. So that, you're trying to, in a way, the part is trying to be safe and be okay and be loved in the world. And so one way that we do that is by being really super sensitive and taking things on and processing things for other people. And that is exhausting. And it's an effective strategy at one point in our lives, and then it becomes a dysfunctional strategy as we grow up.
Yeah, I can definitely see this being really important work for a lot of people, and important work that a lot of people have yet to wake up to or come into an awareness of the necessity and importance of doing this for themselves. So I definitely appreciate you sharing this message and doing this work. We're on this mission together, this lifelong mind-body mastery journey to help awaken and elevate the planet. So I want to make sure that people know how to connect with you with this video on Facebook. Would you? I'll send you the link to it so you can put your links or whatever you'd like for people to be able to connect with you in the comments. Just put a comment on the video with whatever page or website you have for people to connect with you through. And
I'm super easy to find. I'm like Katherine Bird. I'm really easy to find.
Yeah.
I like katherinebird.com and Katherine Bird on Facebook. I have a lot of stuff on Facebook, so I'm super easy to find.
Yeah, so look up Katherine Bird on Facebook and reach out and say hi. That's pretty much what I did, so I can attest it works.
Yeah, I think he sent me a message that was like, "Can you relate this to qigong?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Everything's related to qigong."
Yeah, it
Right?
is.
And I think that's true. I think that I believe that qigong is a master key. You know, that these practices are master key to being able to find you know mastery, but it's like peace and
The next level
being
of humanity.
just like yeah, we're looking to evolve ourselves, and this is definitely a master key. And it's really really needed. And I don't know, they say that qigong is going to blow up like yoga did, and I hope so. I think we need some cool pants or something that's going to make us like
Yeah.
something that's gonna like push it to the next level. So if people could look cute doing it, then I don't know, maybe that's the secret. I don't know, how do you make it more popular so people get hip to how important that this is.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to do, one conversation, one teaching opportunity at a time. So as I always like to say, for those who may have joined us live or who may be watching the replay, if you've always wanted to try Qigong, now is the perfect time. So reach out to us, reach out to Katherine, reach out to somebody, and establish your personal daily practice if you haven't already. And we welcome you on this mind-body mastery journey.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for being with us today, Katherine. Thank you for being here, Andrew. It's really a great opportunity to have this conversation, and I really appreciate and honor everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it. Great.
Thank you.
Drop
Great
in
talking
about
with you.
Awesome. Bye,
Good
guys.
night.